Okay, well, hello everybody. Welcome back. We're going to do the commercial property next. So what I'm going to do is I am going to go ahead and go over to the PowerPoints. So to keep us concentrating on that, so I won't distract you, I'm going to have to stop the video here. And then I will head over to our PowerPoints and we will go ahead and get started on this commercial property. So again, this is the commercial property supplemental material for the P&C pre-licensing class. Now, again, you are in the right place if you've been struggling with property and casualty pre-licensing state exam and you really want this career change, and you have taken a self-study or classroom class and there's so much material, it's hard to figure out what's important. So this is a streamlined approach to what is important on the state test, and hopefully you will learn the key points for each subject. So about myself, I've been in the insurance industry for over 30 years. I've been teaching insurance classes for 27 years. I'm a subject matter expert for Pearson VUE. I've purchased several insurance agencies in addition to owning this insurance school. So the reason why I'm telling you that is that you will know that I am in the trenches with you. Now, I'd love for you to follow me on Facebook and LinkedIn. It's under Tammy Delora Insurance Educators. This is a preparation. I tell people we got to repeat, and a lot of repetition, and that'll give us confidence to pass the state exam. So I want you to inhale confidence and exhale doubt, because this is the best time for new beginnings is now. Okay, let's go ahead and start on this building and personal property coverage form. And this is part of the CPP. Now, a little bit of a review here. We had our business owner policy, and if we can't write our business owner policy, then we're going to start building a CPP policy, one policy at a time. And the very first policy that we're going to build is this building and personal property coverage form. This is a commercial property form. This is the core form for commercial property, and it covers three major things. It covers the building, it covers the insurer's business personal property, and personal property of others if they have any. Now remember, most of your businesses will not have a building. Most of your businesses will not have property of others, but all of your businesses should have your business personal property. So it's okay if you don't write all three of these coverages. There's no relationships like 30%, 40% like you learned in your homeowners and dwelling form. You will just have a limit of insurance shown by one of these three or all of these three different types of coverages. Now, what is your building and personal property coverage form? The very first one is your building. And what is a building? A building is completed additions. It includes your fixtures. It can also include permanently installed machinery and equipment. If that machinery and equipment is not going anywhere, sometimes you can have the business put their machinery and equipment into the building. Also, any personal property used to maintain and service the premises, like fire extinguishers, tractors, and lawnmowers. We had that situation in our homeowner world as well. Any type of outdoor furniture, floor coverings, certain appliances, and we also had materials and supplies as well in our homeowner world. But what you're going to see here in this building and commercial property form is this 100 feet is very important, because your property cannot go past 100 feet. Now, your business personal property, again, it is covered while it is in the building, in the open, or in a vehicle, but it has to be within 100 feet of the premises. And what is this? This is furniture, fixtures, machinery, equipment, stock. Now, if the insured is a tenant, you can put improvements and betterments also. For example, I am a tenant in my commercial building, and I've done a lot of improvements and betterments, like I've made some walls. I have done some flooring. So I've put about $40,000 or $50,000 worth of improvements and betterments. And even though I don't own the building, if there was a fire, I would want to get that back. I would want to be able to build that back again. So on your business personal property, if you have a tenant and they've put a lot of improvements and betterments in their building, especially restaurant owners, then you will want to put that as part of their business personal property. Also, I insure some doctors that have some leased personal property. One of them is a dermatologist, and she does a lot of equipment where within a year it could be outdated. So she'll get another piece of equipment. Well, she leases this equipment, and it's as if she has to insure it as if it is her property. So we have to insure lease personal property because she has this contractual responsibility to insure it. So all of this can go under your business personal property. Remember, when it comes to commercial property, it has to be within 100 feet. You can't carry your business personal property everywhere like you could in the homeowner world, or it could go anywhere in the world. If your business property is going to go over 100 feet, then we're going to have to write you another property policy. Now, personal property of others pays for damage to property of others in the care, custody, and control, whether the insured is legally liable for that loss. When you think about personal property of others, think about dry cleaners, think about Baileys, such as dry cleaners, people that keep other people's property in storage facilities. You know, all of those are perfect examples of Baileys, which are personal property of others. So again, you have three major things that you will be insuring. You will be insuring their building, you'll be insuring their business personal property, and you will be insuring the personal property of others. Now, some property that is not covered. Again, we have no money here as well. You have no animals, just like you had in the homeowner dwelling policy. Animals were not covered unless they are your inventory, unless they are boarded or held for sale. Autos for sale. Basically, you're insuring the building, you're insuring the business personal property, and you're insuring the personal property of others. There's not going to be any bridges, roads, walks, patios, other paved surfaces, no contraband, no cost of excavations, no foundations. You know, when we get into the builder's risk, we'll see that foundations are covered under that builder's risk policy. But here, foundations are not covered under this business personal property form. Boilers are not covered. We're going to talk about boiler machinery coverage as well. So that is not covered. Again, land is not covered, growing crops, lawns. Personal property, while it's airborne or waterborne, it cannot go over that 100 feet. Any type of pilings, piers, wharves, docks, not covered. Retaining walls that are not part of the building. Any type of underground pipes and drains. None of this stuff is covered. The cost to replace or restore information contained in valuable papers is not covered, but then they come around and give you a little bit of that in just a little bit. And again, vehicles, watercrafts, aircrafts, all of those have to be insured on total separate policies. Signs not attached to the building, and there are no coverage for trees, shrubs, or plants. So a lot of this is not covered. A lot of the property that we've had covered, like for homeowners, where we had $200 in money and that type of thing. We had a little bit of tree coverage in our homeowners and dwelling. None of this property is covered in the commercial property. But like you had in your homeowner and dwelling policy, you had some additional coverages, and you have that here. And debris removal is an additional coverage on all of your property forms. So what is debris removal? It's 25% of the sum of the direct physical loss or damage to the covered property. So if the debris removal exceeds that 25 limitation or the limit of insurance, the insurer will pay an additional $10,000 for debris removal. Keep in mind, 25% is not an additional amount of insurance. So, for example, a building is valued at $100,000, is completely destroyed. It costs $15,000 for the removal of debris. So, if it's completely destroyed, an amount of $110,000 will be paid because it exceeded that limit, and then they give you that additional $10,000. So, you do have some debris removal. You do have preservation of property. Remember, this is property moved to another location for any peril, is 30 days here. You've had this for your homeowners for 30 days. Your DP1 was 5 days, and your DP2 and DP3 were 30 days. And remember, your flood was 45 days for preservation of property. There is a fire department service charge of $1,000. There is pollutant cleanup and removal. So if there is a loss on the insured's premises and it needs to cover the cost to extract pollutants from the land or water, if the pollution was caused by a covered cause of loss, like fire, that type of thing. The coverage is subject to $10,000 limit per policy period, and the expenses must be reported within 180 days of the loss. There's also the increased cost of construction, and we talked a little bit about this with building codes. Under our homeowner and dwelling form, we had coverage A. We had 10% of coverage A for additional building codes. And here we have the payable is a lesser of 5% of the amount of the building is insured, or a maximum of $10,000. So there is some coverage for some building codes there. Now, you will always get, the client will always get their additional coverages, but the difference between additional coverages and coverage extensions are the insured has to agree to meet 80% or higher for co-insurance. So with additional coverages that we had just before, the insured is always going to get those if they need them. Now, with coverage extensions, which is something totally different, the insured is only going to get these if they're compliant with their co-insurance. So what is that? Newly acquired or constructed property. So they need to report their newly acquired property within 30 days, but they will automatically get $250,000 for each building and $100,000 for business personal property. Personal effects and property of others, $2,500. It's not a lot of coverage. But what it does is if your employees rush out of a burning building, then the employer could give $2,500 to their employees, and of course for their personal effects. The employees, could actually put a claim under their homeowner policy because their property can go anywhere, but they would have deductibles and surcharges and things like that. So it's nice that they can do this personal effects and property of others. It's $2,500. Now, theft is excluded, but think fire, that's windstorm, that type of thing. Valuable papers and records. They said that there was no coverage. Now they're given $2,500 to replace or restore information. Property on premises. Remember, our property cannot go over 100 feet. So this is very, very strict guidelines for property off premises. It's usually property that is going to be covered at a fair or trade show or an exhibition. Property is not covered while it's on a vehicle. So you have a $10,000 limit there. They excluded outdoor property, but then they bring it back for limited coverage to offenses like fire, lightning, explosion, riot, or civil commotion, to fences, antennas, satellite dishes, signs, trees, plants, and shrubs. The maximum amount is $1,000, and there's $250 limit applying to one tree, plant, or shrub for those very limited perils. So they excluded the tree coverage, and now they're bringing it back. Under your coverage extension, you also have non-owned trailers, which is $5,000. If you were to borrow someone's trailer and think perils, it were to burn up in a fire or it were to get stolen. Now, just like you had in your homeowner and dwelling forms, you have cause of loss forms. And there are 3 causes of loss forms. There's basic, broad, and then there's special. Now, basic looks just like your HOA form, but there is no theft. So you have fire, lightning, and then you have those warbs, which are windstorm, hail, aircraft auto, riot, volcano, explosion, smoke, and vandalism. Sinkhole collapse is also covered, and smoke from agriculture smudging or industrial operations is not covered. So if your building has some smoke damage because of an industrial operation down the road, then the commercial property policy isn't going to pay for that. You'd have to go against that industrial's insurance. The broad form looks like your HO2 form. It includes all those basic perils plus that big effect we talked about. But what it doesn't cover is theft. Again, theft is only covered as special when it comes to commercial property. So a little bit of a review here. When it comes to homeowners, theft is on all the policies. When it comes to dwelling, you have to endorse theft. Here, the only form that has theft is your special policy. So it's basically the big effect there. One of the things I wanted to point out was this collapse. Collapse is considered an additional coverage peril. Collapse is covered when it's caused by breakage of glass, hidden decay, hidden insect or vermin damage, weight of people or personal property, weight of rain that collects on a roof. Now you have this special form, and this is where your theft is. So everything's covered that's not excluded. And here are some additional exclusions like wear and tear and rust and smog and pollutants and settling, cracking, expansion, damage caused by insect, birds, rodents, or other animals, mechanical breakdown. We're going to talk about steam boilers, dishonest criminal acts of insured. So even though you have theft on this special form, employees are still excluded if they steal. Faulty planning, development, design. So none of these cause of loss forms, as you know, like they've never covered on property, do not cover earthquake. So the insured can get an earthquake form usually by a company. Now, again, your major exclusions are what we've already talked about with your homeowners and dwelling, earth movement, which includes earthquake, water damage, which is your flood, even your backup from sewers, drains, and sumps, water seeping through foundations, floors, paved surfaces, basement. Utility services, this is power interruption off the premises. Again, we talked about that before, how there could be an interruption of power and there is no coverage for this. The insured's failure to save and preserve property or protect it from a loss, war, nuclear, intentional, government confiscation. Oh my goodness, sorry about that. Destruction, confiscation, or seizure of property by the government. All of this is excluded. Now, with this commercial property, your co-insurances are usually 80%, 90%, or 100%. Now, just a reminder, when it came to that homeowner dwelling form, remember they told you whether it's going to be ACV or replacement cost, and that is called an unendorsed form. Well, and you can add endorsement to change the ACV to replacement cost. Well, the building and personal property coverage form, what you will do is you will determine with the company whether it can be ACV or replacement cost, and then you will just trigger it. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a summary here on the whiteboard, and let's just kind of talk about that as a review here. So remember, our HO8 and our DP1 had that same exact valuation. And so what they basically said here was your coverage is A, which is dwelling, B, which is other structure, and C, which is contents, was ACV, replacement cost minus depreciation. And remember, your HO2 and HO3 and your DP2 and your DP3, and this should be DP1 here, were all the same as well, where you had coverage A and B, and you had replacement costs as long as you had 80% coinsurance. And then your coverage C was ACV. So your policies came automatically with that. And then if you wanted to endorse this from ACV to replacement cost, you could do that. Now, when it comes to this building and personal property coverage form, which is your commercial property form, what happens here is you could have a building, you could have business, personal property, and then you could have personal property of others. Okay, so you could have, for example, and I'm just going to make this up, you may have a building that's 450,000. Now there's no relationships here. So your business personal property could, let's just say, is 200,000. And then let's just say we do have some property of others of 100,000. So here you would decide, of course, you always want to get replacement costs if you can get it. And if the company lets you, then you would just put it on the application there. Yeah, we want replacement costs. But your personal property of others can only be ACV on this form. And I'm going to show you how to correct that a little bit later, how to make that better. But this is how your commercial property form is you don't have it built into the policy form like you have here. You will trigger it on the application. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint here. So it gets triggered with an X there. Now, some conditions. You have to notify the insurer about the loss or damage as soon as possible. Give a description of the property involved. Notice that you have to notify the police for theft. You have to take reasonable steps to protect your property and complete an inventory. You have to testify under oath with regard to the claim if it's requested by the insurer. And then there's a mortgage holder as well, and they have to have advance notices of cancellations or non-renewal. Again, here you have a vacancy clause, and if the building has been vacant for more than 60 days, the insurer will not pay for loss due to vandalism, water damage, theft, glass breakage, and sprinkler leakage. It's just like your homeowners and dwelling form, but commercial takes it one step further. They say, in addition, any amount that would otherwise be paid for a cover loss will be reduced by 15%. You do not see that in your homeowner and in your dwelling form. Okay, so this means, like, if you have a fire, it's going to be reduced by 50%. If you have a windstorm, it's going to be reduced by 15%. Whereas the homeowner and the homeowner and dwelling policy, they don't have this extra 15% here, but here they do. Okay. Now, inspections and surveys, you have to allow the insurance company to inspect the property. You have to allow them to examine books and records. Now, that is a commercial property form. So what happens here is I'm going to go back to the screen here and just kind of write a couple things down just so that we're clear about this. Is we're going to put these commercial risk on a BOP, which is a business auto policy, a business owner's policy, or we're going to put it on a CPP, a commercial package policy. Now, we want to put it on a BOP if we can. It's lower rates. It is a package policy, and it's got a lot of great coverages for a little bit of money, but it's very, very picky because, again, there are tight eligibility requirements. So if we have to put it on a CPP, we're going to have a common policy declaration here. We're going to have a common policy conditions. And then we just wrote our first property form, which is our building and personal property coverage form, which basically insures 3 properties: your building, your business personal property, and your personal property of others. And now we're going to talk about business income and extra expense. All right, so I'm going to go to the board here. So what is business income coverage? It's great that we have coverage for our building and for our business personal property and for our personal property of others. But while our building is getting repaired, there's no income coming in. And of course, businesses will go out of business really quickly if there's no income. So this business income coverage form is a wonderful form because it pays for loss of income that the insurer sustains due to a direct loss. Okay, it has to be because of a fire, for example, or a windstorm. All right, that forces the insurer to suspend operations during the period of restoration. Now, what is the period of restoration? Because that's an important term there. And that begins on the date of the direct physical loss, like a windstorm, and ends on the date in which the property can be repaired and they open up their doors. So that period of restoration is that time where this business needs to get some income. And this is what this policy is for. So business income includes your net income that would have been earned if the loss had not occurred and the cost of continuing normal operations. You can also put, for that normal operations, you can also put the word expenses because it's not going to pay anything that is not a normal expense, including payroll. So your rent, your mortgage, your health insurance, all these things that are normal expenses, this is what this business income policy will pay for. Now, there's business income with extra expense and business income without extra expense. And we're going to talk about extra expense in just a moment. Now, business income, for the loss to be covered, the suspension of operations must result from direct physical loss to property at the described premises caused by peril insured against the causal loss form. And then we have business income with extra expense, which we'll talk about in just a moment. And then you have extended business income, because once those doors open up after the period of restoration, you may not be getting people coming in as quick as you did before the loss. So they'll give you an extra 30 days to ramp up and get your loss of income, even more so after you open up your doors. Now, what happens here is this form follows the building and personal property coverage form. So if the business income is a basic policy, if the building and personal property coverage form is a basic policy, then this policy will be. If it's broad, then this policy will be. If it's special, then this policy will be. So it definitely follows the building and personal property coverage form. Now, there are some ways that you can write this business income. And one of those is the maximum period of indemnity, where basically it says I can get my business back up within 120 days. It's usually the cheaper way of doing it. For example, with me and my agency, if I were to have a fire there, I could basically rent another place out or work from home and basically have my computers and everything up. And I could be back into business within 120 days. So that would work for a great business like an insurance agency. And then there is this monthly period of indemnity. This is optional coverage. It allows the insured to establish the amount of reimbursement for loss of business income during each 30-day period. So it can be a little bit more than your 120 days. So the insured selects a fraction that is multiplied by the limit of insurance to determine the maximum that could be paid for each 30 days. And then the fractions are usually 1/3, 1/4, and 1/6. For example, if a named insured has a business income limit of $200,000 and elects a monthly limit of 1/4, the named insured receives a payment of whatever loss has been incurred that month. However, the loss payment for any 30-day period never exceeds $50,000. So for the first 30 days, if they have $65,000 lost, they'll pay $50,000. Okay. If they have a $40,000 loss, of course, they're going to pay 40. And if they have 50,000, they'll pay 50,000. So again, it will go until that 200,000 runs out. So if the loss is 30,000, then of course, they'll pay 30,000. So it could go a little bit more than the 120 days. One of the best ways to write this is agreed value. This usually companies won't write agreed value unless the business has been in a while so they can see what their profit and loss statements are. They usually have to do this business income worksheet that they have to complete out to show what their expenses are. But the great thing about it is that if they do have a loss, then it will be for 12 months. So that definitely would help because then you don't have to worry about, spending as much time wondering if you're going to get back to where you were. So business income is a great coverage because what it does is it provides loss of income. It provides some income to them while they are repairing the building. Now, remember, I told you that I could do 120 days in my agency. I would just rent out another location. Well, you got to remember, business income isn't going to pay for that. It only pays for expenses that you had before the loss. So that's why extra expense is so wonderful and a great coverage, because it pays for those extra expenses needed to continue operations. It's also called consequential losses. And it pays for necessary extra expense incurred by the insured to continue operations, maybe at a temporary location, like I talked about, during the period of restoration. So it pays for those extra expenses that the insured did not have before this loss happens. The whole purpose of this extra expense coverage is to shorten that period of restoration. Now, it will also pay for civil authority for up to 3 weeks. Let's say that your neighbor got shut down and you cannot get to your business because of a loss that they had. Then it would pay for that for 3 weeks. It's also called a time element coverage. And this is how it's usually written, is in 40, 80, 100%. So what will happen is the insured, you will pick an extra expense limit. And then if the period of restoration is 30 days or less, then you would use this first percentage. If it's 31 to 60 days, then you would use the second percentage. And if the period of restoration is over 60 days, then you would use the third percentage. So to give you an example, how this would work is the policy limit is 100,000 and it takes 40 days to repair the property. So if it takes 40 days to repair the property, then you're going to use this second percentage, which is 80%. So 100,000 times 80% is what the insurer would pay in extra expense. So again, extra expense is for those types of coverages that were not, that the insured did not have before this loss. So let's go back over here and talk a little bit about the three things that we've talked about here. So we have a common policy declaration, and we have our common policy conditions, and then we have our building and personal property coverage form. That basically what we're talking about with a building and personal property coverage form is that it's insuring three things. It's insuring the building, it's insuring business personal property, and personal property of others if we have it, right? And then we talked about business income, and these are your expenses that you had before you had this loss. So it keeps paying those. And then extra expense are extra expenses that you have to reduce that period of restoration, like buy another location. Now, remember, this building and personal property coverage form insures these three things. It insures your building, it insures your business personal property, and personal property of others. Also, with these three things, you are either going to have a basic policy, which does not cover theft, a broad policy, which doesn't cover theft, or a special policy, which is where your theft starts. Now, remember, these are three separate policies, but they all follow form. So they go together. If this policy is basic, then these two will be basic. If this policy is broad, these two will be broad. If this policy is special, these two would be special. Okay, so that is your commercial property and how that works. Okay, so I'm going to come back to you for a second. That concludes our commercial property. We talked about our building and personal property coverage form. We talked about business income, and we talked about extra expense. So now what we're going to do next is we're going to do the boiler and machinery form. So I'll see you in the next class.